something wrong, as you said, it's a work in progress. We're acknowledging we don't know, right? We're just trying to think outside of the box. And you know, if we have somebody in drug treatment court, and they have purely a drug problem, but there are certain sanctions and motivations that work there. But if you have somebody with those same drug problems that also has a mental health component, we started experiencing the fact that it wasn't quite fair to insist on the discipline for the people with the mental health issues that we insist on for the drug treatment people. It may not be perfect, but as I said, it's a matter, something that's in flux, and we're looking really to understand more. If we could get more professionals involved, you know, we don't have our own on-board psychiatrists. We take people into the system who have an established treatment plan and are not following. And then we rely on the feedback and the liaison between our people in the system to keep us in contact with the doctor, and the doctor to keep in contact with us so that we know what's going on. So we know it's not perfect, and if you got suggestions, write them out. We'll take it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Also, what most people don't realize, and this is my personal opinion, is people that are under the influence of drugs and alcohol at the time, that's how they deal with their issues. When they're coming off the drugs and alcohol, it seems as though they start, I don't want to say developing mental health issues, but have issues with dealing with their everyday problems, where if they get a flat tire, they're going to go and use drugs. Now that they're clean, this is like the biggest problem in the world, and they don't want to cope with it. So anxiety comes into play, and depression. I think that's, in my opinion, where the co-occurring part comes in, that we're trying to deal with both issues at the same time. If that makes sense.
What if you knew an individual that did not want to admit or is not coming to terms that they do have a drug problem, a street drug problem, but they also do, at least they admit that they do have a mental health issue?
Well, sometimes
would be your advice?
sometimes it's a very cruel answer, and that rehabilitation starts in prison. And that's what I was saying about the teeth of the judicial system to be used to get somebody to accept the fact that, yeah, I do have a drug problem, okay? You know, they start thinking, every time I do drugs, I end up in jail. Maybe it has something to do with doing drugs. And, you know, it is sometimes cruel, but, you know, people refer to seeing the light. Sometimes they really change because they felt the heat.
I want to save a little time for the CIT team, but I know the problem-solving courts a lot talk about that external motivation bringing about an internal change, and that's been proven to work within the problem-solving court model. So it's a point well taken. Thank you, Judge. At this point, I want to turn it to Chief Duffy and Ray Hayes to present about the Scranton Area Crisis Intervention Team. Gentlemen.
Okay, you know, I think the judge hit it right on the head. Work in progress. That's really what it is, and that's really what everything comes down to. It's a work in progress. I think that's the reason that everybody's here today. You know, nobody has all the answers, but I think it's every leader's responsibility and every person's responsibility to be willing to go back to the drawing board to make things better, and that's what it's all about. And you know, I was fortunate that when I became the chief, the CIT team was already in place. It was just at its early stages. However, I was on board with it right from day one after, you know, speaking with Ray Hayes several times about it. And also, some of my background too, my wife is actually a drug and alcohol and co-occurring mental disorder counselor. So I have an understanding that maybe more so than the average police officer might, with understanding people and how people operate. And that it's not necessarily the crime, and I believe the judge talked about that. It's not the crime that's the issue, it's the underlying cause that's causing the crime to take place. And so I understand that, and that's one of the reasons that I'm 100% behind the CIT program in Scranton. And Ray Hayes will really be the talking head on this one. He really was there at its infant stages, and I can tell you right now, he really is a tremendous asset to the city of Scranton, to this entire region. I can tell you right now, from the side of academia, of being an instructor, and also from his involvement in the CIT team. So I want to give you credit for that. With the Scranton CIT program, you know, we recognize, like I recognize our calls. The amount of CIT See, what we do is the officers are trained. They're trained to recognize persons who may have a mental illness or person in crisis. And what happens is, through that training, they develop better understanding. So if I respond to a call, and I have to make that split-second determination. Is that person under the influence of drugs? Is that person is that a person in crisis? What is that? And that's what these officers are trained to do. So what happens is, anytime there's a call in the Scranton Police Department that has an inkling of, there's a possibility of a person with a mental illness being involved in that, a CIT officer is sent there and they're dispatched out there to assess the situation. And, you know, we have seen that our numbers have tripled with the amount of calls that we've been dispatching them on, because we have more officers trained as a result of it. So I mentioned earlier, my goal is to get our entire uniformed division trained eventually, and that will take some time. That will certainly take a long time, but we have to move in that direction in order to make a difference. Because we could just sit around and wait for tragedies to happen, but that's not going to do anything. We have to be proactive and go out there and find out what works and what doesn't work, but we have to try to make it work better. And the CIT program is a perfect example of that. Started out from a tragedy, and Ray Hayes, I'm sure, is going to touch on that a little bit. Started out from a major tragedy, but since then, how many lives did it help? Probably helped a ton of lives out there. And I can tell you firsthand, I got a phone call from somebody not too long ago who was concerned about a person who had a mental illness, and they believed that this person wasn't taking their medication, and the police continuously were dispatched there. However, it didn't seem anything was being done. So I reached out to the CIT board, I explained the situation, and they got together and actually did something about it. You know what I mean? They actually did something about it. As opposed to saying, oh, we'll just wait until the call comes in. No, let's be proactive in this. We don't want another tragedy here. We want to get that person the help that they need. So with that being said, I'll be here all day, of course, for questions in reference to law enforcement. But as far as the CIT program itself, Ray Hayes truly is the talking head as far as correlating with law enforcement. I'm a huge supporter of it, but I'm absolutely not an expert in it. But I know that this is something that's absolutely necessary in our entire region.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Certainly, I appreciate those kind comments and remarks that he made regarding me. However, that is somewhat true. Okay. However, it's really about partnerships. And as I look out into the audience here, from a partnership perspective, we have individuals and groups here, such as NAMI and the Advocacy Alliance and the concept of peer specialists. This isn't simply only a police involvement type program. It is as the term implies, CIT, Crisis Intervention Team. It's a specialized police-based program where police officers receive a structured 40-hour curriculum in all different phases of how to deal with individuals in crisis. De-escalation techniques, suicide prevention, psychotropic medicine, so they have an idea what's going on. And the beauty of the program is that we as the CIT board massage the curriculum, so to speak, which is based on the Memphis model, as I had said before. And our group actually went to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, almost 2 years back now, where we actually went through the training in a train-the-trainer concept. A number of police officers from the Scranton Police Department, Mariana Kovich, Carl Mosier, and a number of others, John Lewis, who works here at the 911 Center, because we recognized early on that the most important point in this whole program is the point of dispatch. So what we try to do is cover all of our bases from the point of dispatch right up to and including the response and follow-up of the police officers. And we also discover that, and we know that police officers in Pennsylvania have to go through about 750 hours of police training. Of that, about maybe 28 or 30 hours deals with individuals who may be mental health issues, whether it's Alzheimer's patients, other patients who are suffering from intellectual disabilities, a very small amount of training. So now we have 2 classes of police officers who are trained in CIT. They have certificates, And the goal is to have many more, and since it was opened up to the county, we've run 2 classes of 20 in each class, and we anticipate running another one. Maria's in January, we're going to be running another class. I see Lisa Bauer, who also is in one of our classes, and she has related, Lisa's related to us that she has used some of those skills that she has acquired. And it's just, we're sort of an additional, we identified in our task force report, could you hand me that, Dan? That there were a number of gaps in the system. And anybody who's interested in the report can get it on the Scranton PA webpage. It's a lengthy report, and we identified some gaps in the system. And one of the big gaps was we have an individual here who does not meet the criteria for a 302 commitment. So in terms of policing, it was, well, if you haven't done anything, we're going to be leaving. If you did something minor, you may receive a citation, a non-traffic citation for disorderly conduct, or something along those lines. And there was that big gap. And what we're trying to do is now we're trying to fill that gap. And the CIT officers actually wear what is called a CIT pin, and we try to get very involved in the community. They go to the drop-in center, which is on Jefferson Avenue under the Advocacy Alliance. And they actually get to interact with those who are consumers of mental health services. Because generally the only time they were ever interacting before was when the individual was in crisis. So it's so much better to be able to meet them and know them and to interact with them before a crisis occurs. So then you recognize who the individual may be, and you've established this bond. When we went to Johnstown, they told us that when their crisis intervention officers first went to the drop-in center, everybody ran out the back door, because they saw the police arrive. And generally, when the police arrive, there's other things. They're bringing something else with them, so to speak, okay? Now, they welcome them, or if a regular police officer responds when they're in crisis and they don't see a CIT pin, they say, it's like, call my lawyer, I want my CIT officer. So it's really, the transition has been great. And we're very excited in our area here also, because as Judge Derula mentioned, in terms of mental health court and veterans court and drug court, we're on the cutting edge. We're so proud to say that in our area, we were probably the 3rd or 4th agency in Pennsylvania to adopt the program. And we've had some calls now from Luzerne County that they're looking to, they just had an incident where an individual who was in crisis confronted the police with a firearm and was shot. So we're looking to fill some of those gaps. And when the task force was formed, we came up with a number of recommendations, and we're really proud to say, because of the work of Carl and Marie and a lot of the people who I haven't mentioned that are in this room, we decided that 5 things should happen, and I'll be really the Reader's Digest version was that the city of Scranton would adopt a CIT model, which we did, and expanded it to the county. The county actually gave us $10,000 of startup money, which was tremendous, because we have to get binders and provide lunches for the training, and it can be somewhat costly. Also, that we established a specialized protocol for responding. We did that in conjunction with the Scranton Police Department. They now have a policy when a CIT officer should be called and what are the parameters and what can they do. They're certainly not a substitution for a SWAT team, but you know, when an individual is an individual crisis and they're not presenting a danger outside of themselves, you don't need a full response. Sometimes it's a waste of precious resources.